Welcome to Schooling Around. Today we pay a visit to the fastest growing program in the Oxford School District, the Oxford Virtual Academy. We'll talk about their new partners, new facilities, and their special connection to special ed. Stay tuned.
Do you love local sports? Whether it's Oxford High School or Parks and Rec, you can buy copies of each game. To purchase your copy, call us at 248-628-9658 or give us an email at manager@occtv.org or talk to us at the next game. Hopefully we'll see you there.
The Oxford Virtual Academy is in its 7th year. It's a combination of OVA and the early college program. Over 1,400 students. Janet Schell is in her 2nd year as principal of both. Laura Farwell is the new operations coordinator. The last few months have shown growth in students and partnerships beyond expectations.
Well, we had a very busy summer. Our schools of choice enrollment opens in March and it doesn't end until approximately the week before school ends. So we enrolled over 400 new students to the Oxford Virtual Academy. So that was a huge undertaking. We also have added a bunch of new partnership programs to our roster. So we have 24 total now. We did add both some here in the Oxford school area and then some in the further extended community. So we added the Academy of Russian Ballet in Wixom. So they offer ballet and dance classes. We added Aqua Swim Club, which is resides right up there at the Oxford High School. They use the Oxford High School pool. We added Build Your Own Temple, which is in the Legacy Center, and they do CrossFit training with the kids, which it's been a huge hit. We also added Honor Guards fencing, so fencing courses in Auburn Hills, which is a very interesting elective. I don't think they ever offered it when I was in high school, that's for sure. And then we also added the Rochester School of Dance. Dance seems to be a very big popular elective. There are many dancers that dance all the way from the beginning stages all the way up to semi-professional type dancers. So we added one in Rochester. And then we also added something called Agri Projects, which is horseback riding and some other cross-curricular entities, and that's offered here in Oxford at Shenanigans Farms. So we live in, horse country. It was only natural to pick somebody or partner with somebody who was local in the area, and those classes have been, maxed out since they opened. So many kids want to take that.
Fill me in on something. When you say virtual ed, you think of a student sitting at a computer desk. Mm-hmm. The places that you just mentioned involve things where you've got to be there practicing doing stuff.
So we call that the lab component of an online class. So you have an online platform. We use the Oxford Schools Haiku platform where we create an online course, and I will take the Agri Projects class as an example. That class, horseback riding is just a small portion of it. The main portion of the course is studying architecture, barn, feed, hay, horse muscles, art, the science of feed and nutrition, and there's multiple things that they cover because that is an industry here in Oxford, and we'd like to support our community groups, our community businesses, and kids who participate in those. So that's why that one was dear to us to be able to open that as an option. We're looking forward to offering music in the future here in Oxford. That's one of our weak spots. So we're pursuing that right now.
You mean like instrumental music?
Yep, just music out in the community. There's a couple music studios where kids can go in and have a music course as a general elective and receive some credit and a cross-curricular approach. So Lisa Sullivan, our homeschool director, has been working diligently with Laura to provide a pathway for these businesses to partner with the school community, which is I think a big part of the Michigan 10 and 10, the Department of Ed's charge to school districts to be partnering with their parents, community, and innovative. So we feel like here in Oxford we are the incubators of innovation, and these are the opportunities that allow these kids to be able to
Well,
be creative.
it sounds like you've had significant growth. Did you say 400 kids? Or is that an additional 400 kids, or?
Yes. So, there's always going to be kids who move or choose to go to another district or choose to go back to homeschool. But we enrolled 400 new students. So I can't give away the numbers quite yet because count isn't over. But yes, we're expecting a pretty substantial increase in our FTE for Oxford Virtual Academy and OSAC.
With the growth has come the need for facilities expansion. More on that next.
Battles aren't won solely on the field. Battles are won within. Over enemies of fear. Enemies of doubt. In that place where promises are kept. In the heart of every Marine, you'll find a promise. A promise of battles won.
Oxford Virtual Academy is located in the Oxford Marketplace on M24 just south of the village. The facility has doubled in size in the past couple of years. Janet tells of some of the most recent updates.
Yep. The old lab at 176 needed a little bit of a facelift after we opened this facility last year for our kindergarten through 5th grade students. We also use this facility for instructional time. The teachers come in and work in the cubbies. We have a class that's going on. We have about 15 to 18 students are in a coding club class. That's an elective for pretty much 4th to 8th graders. So then we decided to, go next door and kind of take a fresh look. It was needing some little bit of love and care. And get some new fresh paint, carpet, put some walls up just to make it a little bit more conducive for some privacy. So we just completed that and looking forward to a productive and fun year with our kids.
It seems like we're hearing more and more advertising on media for other virtual academies, that sort of thing. Obviously, some are better than others, and certainly we're at the top of the list. But what should people watch out for when they look at stuff like this?
They need to make sure that their students have a certified attached teacher, a mentor, that they offer special education to students, interventions as needed, a 504, really it's all things equal. So whatever you would see in a public seated school, you should see in our school. You should see great customer service. You walk in the door, you should be greeted with a smile, and how can we help you? I mean, you can talk about that being the operations.
I came on board last fall, and I can tell you that there's a big difference in what OVA provides in comparison to many of the other virtual schools. We have a very personalized staff. Many of the times you're getting an Oxford teacher who is teaching your children. It's not somebody who is hired out that we don't have a relationship with, and that really makes a difference. I think that the teachers that we employ are great. They always go above and beyond. The other thing is choice. OVA has so many different choices. I think that you were just in shock with the 7 new partnerships that we offered. I think that when you think of virtual learning, you think of sitting in front of a computer for X amount of hours a day. That's not the case with OVA. Kids can go at their own pace. They can take some courses online. They can do some lab components, such as horseback riding or photography or whatever in the community. They can also mix it with some seated courses. They can take dual enrollment. We work with many different vendors. So it is just such a large pool of options and opportunities that the kids have to choose from. It sets us far above any of the other virtual schools that I have knowledge of.
And I'll piggyback on that. That conversation speaks to personalized learning. And again, the MDE has put out their 10 and 10, to be top 10 and 10. They want schools to be these centers of innovation and to provide personalized education that's throughout the document. And we feel like at OVA and at OSAC, and these courses then being allowed to all of our students in the district, middle school, the high school, and elementaries, that this provides an avenue for students who need a personal pathway to be able to get that from Oxford schools. And we're proud to work for the district.
OVA is a unique institution with some unique students.
We have a gymnast who is busy doing her thing, and at a high level, she's able to participate in all of that while being an Oxford Virtual Academy student.
I think that new enrollment wise, I enrolled at least one professional ice skater who the Virtual Academy has allowed her to go and train the way that she needs to. Also, the ones who kids that weren't maybe coming from other districts, weren't very successful in a seated environment, maybe they have anxiety or it just didn't go well, and they have moved here and it's been 8 weeks and they're just doing so much better with the support of our staff.
Next, a look at an area of OVA you probably wouldn't have expected. When we think of special education, we think of providing education to some special kids, kids with a multitude of challenges requiring some very special teachers. In seated classrooms, we're talking groups of kids, many requiring different types of attention, with one teacher. Now let's look at this through the eyes of special ed teacher Pam Harwell and OVA.
That's an interesting subject, special education
Yes.
in virtual ed.
Yes. Very interesting. I agree.
Give me an overview of special education in the virtual ed setting.
Yeah, that's a tough one. The kids who come here have, they might have a disability such as, autism or anxiety or ADHD or a learning disability in math, reading, or writing, just like in a seated world. But we have to accommodate them here. So a lot of times there's a lot of things I can do online and work with their programs. For instance, let's say a kid has learning disability in math, and so they struggle a lot with math. We might do things like, allow them to use a calculator, which they could do anyway in the virtual world, but we can also reduce their assignments so that they're not covering like as much. They just focus on the key or the required standards. And then also I schedule time to meet with them. Okay, so just like in the seated high school, they might go to a resource room teacher for their math, then they could come here for math. And maybe they're fine with their English and their social studies and their science, but they need to come to me for, sometimes it's an hour every day I see a kid. Sometimes it's 3 days a week. Sometimes it's 1 day a week. And then I'll work with them directly on, whatever skill they have a deficit in. So it's really kind of similar to the seated, but what's hard sometimes is that the kids, in a seated program, they're going every day. And so they just know, okay, this is my math time. I go to see this special ed teacher. Where in a virtual, their parent or themselves, some of the kids drive, they have to get themselves here to see me. I have been trying to do some of the Adobe Connect sections and things like that, learn how to do that because some of my kids can't get here and then they need help. And so how do we do that? To give them the help they need without sitting right next to them and helping them. So we have to do it on the screen or call them and say, let's work through these problems together.
So what age group are you dealing with specifically?
Well, I'm actually here for K through 12, but I have very few elementary kids. I have, let's see, on my caseload now I have 1 5th grader, I have 3 6th graders, and then the rest are high school kids that I work with.
So are these kids getting their total education here at Oxford Virtual Ed or only certain classes?
Yes, all my kids have, well, no, I take that back. I have some kids who do take some seated classes at the high school, like their ASL class, or I have one kid taking like film and audio there. And I'm trying to think what other classes. an English class, so it depends on where we look at where their style is, their learning style. So some kids like the hands-on for certain classes and they want to be there. Some kids are like, okay, I'm fine doing my, let's say my geometry online, but I really need to be with someone every day for my English. So we kind of work with them and we can do a mixed schedule. A lot of my students, though, definitely have all their classes with OVA. They can have a partnership class too. I always recommend that they have some kind of hands-on class so that they're not just always on the computer. So like they might go to the Legacy Center and do boxing, or they might go to Merge and do ceramics. So they at least have one elective class, especially my 6th graders, my elementary, which I only have 4 kids this year, but I do recommend, get out, do some classes in person, that you can get those hands-on experiential, learning from there. And then they come with me, like I have a group of 6th graders that come every day here, and we do an online program called iLit. And it's an awesome program. It's a comprehensive reading and writing, so a language arts intervention program. And they have it on their computer, but I'm also teaching them. So I can send things to them. Like from my computer, I send it to them. So like a vocabulary assignment or whatever. And then we actually read a read aloud together. We're reading a novel together. It's on the computer, but it's a novel, and we read it together, and we do comprehension activities, vocabulary activities, writing activities, all based around this novel. So it's like having a language arts class, but it's partially virtual and partially in person. It's like a mixture.
It sounds to me like the advantage is a one-on-one situation. Is that true?
Well, in the group of 6th graders, I have 3 of them with me. And so they'll sit at this little table over here, and I'll come over to the table too and bring my computer over there, and we'll sit together. Just like you would see like in a regular classroom, a teacher sitting at a table with kids and they're all opening a book. We all have our laptops, and we have our story we're reading on our laptop, but then I will send them assignments and they can do them independently at home. Okay, so the advantage is, they get like a small group or one-on-one. You're right, some of the kids I see one-on-one, because I have one student who's a high school kid doing geometry. His goal is in math, so he's the only one I have, so I can't put him in a group, so I do see him individually. And that's like that with a lot of my kids, I do see individually, but I do love having a little group. I feel lucky that I have a group of 6th graders, 3 of them that are on the same level, and because that's the thing with special ed, you have to teach them from where they're at. You can't just say you're all going into this level and they're going to be lost. You have to start, and they happen to all kind of test at that same level, so I put them in an iLit class together, and it's been great.
As good as it sounds, OVA Special Ed is not for everyone. More on that in a moment. The personal attention of OVA Special Ed sounds pretty good, but there are exceptions. The individual education plan is an important aspect of this program. Pam tells us more.
There's some kids who come here and I say, this might not be the best place for you, the special ed kids that I deal with. So then we kind of look at it and say, what can we do to help you here? But if that doesn't work, then I have had kids go back seated. So it's really about finding the right fit for those kids and having the parents, when they're young like that, they have to drive them here. And so that's the thing with virtual. They're not just going to get in a bus and go to the school and be there all day and then they come home after the parents done from work. So a lot of my parents are stay-at-home moms, or they're moms that work from home, or they have grandparents that can get them here. But yeah, the advantage is, I have kids who they process a little slower. So we can slow down. They can slow down and go at their speed. It's not like they're with the class and have to stay up with the class and then they start feeling frustrated and it's like they have to go after school to catch up with the teacher, or on the weekends trying to catch up, where this class is tailor-made for my kids. So.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that might be a little
Sure.
controversial here,
That's
but
okay.
it has to do with what you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
In the schools, and correct me if I'm wrong, they've got this, is it No Child Left Behind? Is that the right program?
Yeah, I think,
It's where they
Yeah.
mix, you know what I'm trying to
right,
say.
I know what you're saying.
Where they
yeah.
mix the kids together where they can. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not, I don't know. But it sounds to me like this is another answer to that situation.
Yes, OVA definitely is another answer for that. For all kids, not just special ed kids. There's kids who don't function well in a big group environment. So you have, like, let's say, just thinking of No Kids Left Behind, but I think they're changing. I don't know about the legalities of all that stuff as much, but, because I'm a teacher, I focus on teaching kids, but I know the legalities are important too, but that they had set standards where, if you're not at a third grade level, by third grade, that, you shouldn't move on type thing. No Child Left Behind. They really want to, the idea behind it was good. They want to give interventions to kids, but the bad part of it was that not all kids are ready at certain times to learn certain things. There's a developmental span. You have a classroom, let's say 28 kids of third graders. You can have everything from a first grade reading level up into whatever. You can have a really precocious third grader reading, at a ninth grade level, So you have that poor teacher trying to meet the needs of all those kids at one time. So what they did was they did take, like, what's called a response to intervention program, RTI, and they started saying, okay, we got to take out the kids that are really low performing and give them interventions. So the whole idea behind it was great, but the stress on the teachers and the kids to meet those standards all at that grade level is very intense. It's very intense and it's difficult. So, and they don't have as many resources. I'm talking about in the seated program. And here sometimes, there are kids, like I said, where I just feel like I can't meet their needs if it's because of transportation issues or the severity of their disability. So it's all about working together, though. And I think that OVA here in Oxford, that's where we kind of fill a gap and we kind of work together. And, we've also talked about offering some of the intervention online programs to the seated students to try to meet some of those gaps, because there's just not enough people to deliver all the programs that they need in the seated programs.
But there are some challenges. Pam talks about that and a very unique teacher after this.
Vision loss is not something that you feel until it happens.
Most people lose their vision from diseases like macular degeneration and glaucoma, not at birth.
3 million Americans have glaucoma, and half don't even know it.
11 million people in the United States have macular degeneration.
So many eye disorders can be treated if caught early.
Make a plan today to get your eyes checked.
Visit brightfocus.org to learn more.
With the OVA special ed program, it is necessary for teacher and student to get together. More from Pam Harwell.
Because there's not a bus that brings the kids here, because this is like a choice that they're making, so it's kind of like school of choice, but a lot of our kids are Oxford kids, but they do have to get transportation here. But no, I love it because the other teachers here, all the content teachers, are so willing to work with me as a special ed teacher. And if I go and I say, this science lesson was so intense for this kid and they have a disability in math, but they're taking a, general ed science class, and that specific lesson was just all math. Can we do something about that? Well, we have a science teacher, it's the 6th grade science teacher, she's living in Sweden. She Skyped for over an hour with one of my students and just sat there with her and just worked her way through this assignment. So they're so willing to just give that kid that attention and time, because they're not sitting in front of a class all day. I'm not saying that seated teachers don't want to do that, but they don't have the time to do that because they're boom, boom, boom. Their whole day is pretty much classes. So to say, this kid needs some individual attention, how do you do that, right? They have to stay, during their lunch, or they have to stay after or before school, and that's very difficult, So here we have a little more flexibility because a lot of our students are pretty independent workers, so the ones that do need that extra, we can say, hey, let's sit with you for an hour. one-on-one. The rest of the class is off at home or wherever they are doing their work, right? So a totally different situation than a seated. Does that make sense?
It does, you know, it almost sounds to me like in some cases you're like a specialized tutor. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You could look at it that way too. Yeah, like kind of like at Sylvan where they do those placement tests. They see where the kids are and they go from there. I can do that as a special ed teacher definitely here. I'm always assessing my kids and seeing where they're at, and a lot of the programs that I have give me that data, which is really nice. At a seated program, I would sit next to a kid, and I still do this here sometimes, sit next to a kid and you listen to them read, right? And then you can take notes. It's called a running record. And you're taking notes, okay, what errors did they make? And then you score them at what is their reading level, what's their fluency, what's their comprehension. You ask them questions. My program I use, the kids can do that either with me or they can be on their own. That's the joy of it. It's like I can say, hey, you know, get on iLit and do this word reader for me. And what they do is they read it out loud to the computer. Later, I can listen to it and score it, and the computer scores it too, but I can also listen to it and override the score and score it myself if I kind of differ from the computer's score. But what that does is free me up for, let's say I'm working with another kid. I don't have time to work with that kid or listen to that kid. I can still get the data. Where in a seated program, we would have to get a substitute, or we would have to, I mean, you kind of kill yourself, really, to be honest with you, reading with, 28 kids. I wasn't a general ed teacher for my whole time I taught in a seated program. I was a special ed teacher. But there were, let me think, I think 6 years I taught in gen ed. And it's difficult. I mean, those teachers have a lot of work. Think about it, individually reading with 28 kids, and they have to do it 3 times a year. And if the kid passes one level, they have to move them up to the next level. And it takes an extraordinary amount of time to get through their class, and they're doing that. And so you have to give our teachers credit. They're really working hard. And I mean, we all are, but in a way that kind of puts the assessment, what you're doing is you're taking away from instruction.
Finally, making the tough choices. Whom can you help? Here's Pam.
Well, really, it's like here and seated anywhere, it's the IEP process. Okay, so let's say the teachers notice that a student is struggling. Okay, we put them in a process called RTI, which is response to intervention. We start giving them different strategies or different support. And let's say that doesn't help. So then we go, okay, what's next? And what's next? There's kind of like a 3-tier process. And it can get to the point where we say, hey, we have to test that kid for special education. Sometimes a parent will come to us and say, my kid's really struggling. I'd like, to see if they need special education. So what we do is we have a team, myself, and then there's a psychologist, and sometimes a social worker, depending on the needs of the kids. If they're social, emotional, if they're just academic, we don't really call in the social worker. But so it depends on the kid and what the needs are. So what we do is assess the kid. I give them standardized testing, so does the psychologist, and we see, does this kid have an actual learning disability? Is there a gap in their ability, in their knowledge base? If they do, then they potentially can qualify for a IEP, which is an individual education plan. Those are the kids I service. Now, do I help other kids along the way? Sure. If a kid's in RTI and, I have a kid who's doing iLit with me who isn't technically a special ed kid, but he needs that, and I have a group and I'm like, yeah, join us. In the old days, because I've been teaching a long time, it used to be I could only service the kids who had an IEP, as a special ed teacher. Now I love it because I can help kids who are struggling, who aren't. And that's where you draw the line, though. Do they really need me? I'm the highest level of intervention, or can we help them out by a few tweaks in maybe their delivery of their education? So that's kind of where you draw the line. Do they really need someone with them for a whole hour delivering an assignment, or can they do it with maybe, okay, let's give them a little bit of tweaks over here? So that's where I kind of draw the line. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, is there an extra cost to the families for any of this, or is it all?
No. This is all part of Oxford education. As long as you are, Janet probably could address that more, like about what the guidelines are for paying and not paying. I mean,
No.
if you apply in your school of choice, right? You don't have to live in Oxford. It's just school of choice.
Yeah.
You know, just like if a kid from Lake Orion applied to Oxford High School, same thing. We have kids from Lake Orion and Clarkston, and it's all free.
Special education through the eyes of a special educator. Thanks to Janet Schell, Laura Farwell, and Pam Harrell over at OVA, and to Kyle Snage at the controls, Dan Zweiss at the computer, and you for watching. This is Oxford Community Television, keeping it local.